We're doing a crossover from between the Bridge podcast and Nadine in China. We're going to talk about what it's like living in China as a foreigner and what keeps expats here so long. Welcome to my program, and I guess I'm on yours. Hello, Nadine.
Hi, Jason. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you as well. I've been actually thinking about having on the show for a long time, so it's really exciting that we can get together like this and kind of share our experiences with one another. Just so our audience know, where are you from?
So I am from South Africa. A lot of people are surprised when I say that because I think just they don't expect it. Maybe they think I'm Russian or something or Ukrainian, but I'm actually from South Africa. A lot of people are also confused about my accent because I don't have a typical South African accent. And that's partly because I did live in the US for a short time. But when I lived there, people sometimes had a hard time understanding me. So I started to just kind of change the way I spoke. And then when I came to China, people always also encouraged me to speak in a more American way. So I kind of lost my real accent. So I am from South Africa. And
I have so many questions now. Wait, so when you came to China and people encouraged you to speak in an American way, can you elaborate on that part? Because that sounds unusual.
Okay, when I came to China, I was part of this, it was like a cultural exchange program. And I lived in this very, very small little town on the outskirts of Shenyang. There were no foreigners. I was the first foreigner to ever set foot in that town.
Wow.
And I mean, everyone was, it was like, I was like a celebrity over there. And at the time, the people, they just told me, oh, Chinese really love American accents. So, you said you lived in America. So let's just pretend that you are from America. They didn't want me to admit that I was from South Africa because they thought maybe people will not understand, I'm from South Africa. Maybe they have different ideas in their mind of what Africa or South Africa is like. So they just encouraged me to, kind of be American. So,
well, before we get to like your life in China or our lives in China, can you tell me about your time in America? I'm an American, so that's interesting to me. Where did you live? How long were you there? What were you doing?
So I lived in Atlanta, in a small neighborhood in northern Atlanta. And I was there for just under 2 years. And I actually worked there as an au pair. So when I was in high school, the most common thing for people to do after graduating high school was to either go to university or go abroad. And at the time when I was about in 10th grade or 9th grade, the most common country people would go to was England because it was the easiest for South Africans. But then when I was in 12th grade, the English government stopped that. They were like, no, there's too many of you coming here. So we kind of had to find different avenues. And then a popular thing became for young girls to see the world was to be an au pair. And it was the easiest way to, go to America. And I'd always dreamt of going to America. So I took that opportunity. And then I was an au pair for 2 small little children, American children. And I lived with the family as well.
Wow. Can I, well, okay, I only heard the term au pair 3 or 4 years ago from my first time. So could you tell some of our listeners, what is an au pair?
So an au pair is basically a live-in nanny. And usually she is from a different country. It's not like if you're an American and you have an American nanny, she's just your nanny. An au pair, I believe it's a French word, and it means it means something like live in or on par or like always available kind of. So we would, go to different countries, and it's not just America that hosts au pairs. There's a lot of countries that do it. And that's actually, we'll come back to that later on part of the story, how I ended up in China. But basically you just travel to another country for the purpose of experiencing the culture, learning about the culture, and then taking care of their kids. A lot of people actually
the sound of music.
Yeah, no. Yeah, a lot of people always say that an au pair is like cheap child labor because to get the au pair to America is cheaper than hiring an American nanny. But I actually don't think it's true because the host family has to pay for your flights. They have to pay for you to attend university during your stay with them.
Wow.
They have to give you a car. They have to pay your insurance. They pay you a salary, everything. They feed you, everything. So I cannot quite imagine how it can be cheap childcare in comparison to an American nanny. But I
Yeah.
mean, I don't really know what they get paid, so I couldn't really say.
Well, from what I've heard, au pairs are typically reserved for families that are better off. Most American families can't afford to have a live-in person come in and help them with
Right.
all of their child care, and that's, yeah. So I don't think, yeah, I agree with your assessment. I don't think it's like that. Well, okay, I'm going to tell my story a little bit. So in 2012, I decided to move to China, because I had a history degree in world history, but I'd not seen the world. So coming to Asia was a great way for me to see a completely different way of life. And I just kind of, we'll talk about why I'm still here later. But could you tell us about how, well, firstly, before what other countries did you visit or live in, and then how did you end up in China? Kind of, could you tell us the story of Nadine coming to China?
Sure. Well, first of all, interesting. I also came to China in 2012. Uh, just like you said, you also came. So for me,
What?
I've only been in America and China, and then obviously in South Africa as well. And I think a big part of why I ended up in China is because I was in America. And, it's like everything we do in life has like these choices you make leads to one thing, leads to another, and then eventually you end up where you end up. And I always wonder about if I had taken made a different choice somewhere along the line, where I would have been now. I'm really not sure. It's hard to say. But basically, when I was growing up, I always had this dream of abroad, because when I was a kid in the 90s, America was like this is something you saw in the movies only. It wasn't a real thing. It was just the magical movies, right? So I always had this fantasy about what America was like and life in America. So I always knew that I was curious about it. And I always watched movies. I was so interested in it. And then as I got older and I started to realize that I would have opportunities to go abroad, I decided to look more into them. But then at the time, just before graduating high school, I actually a young teenage girl, I met a boy and we fell in love. And then we were kind of just in a committed relationship. And as the years went by, I kind of realized that what would end up happening is we would get married, we would, buy a house, buy a car, have kids, and then that would be our lives. And I realized I didn't want that. And one day we went to the movies, and after the movies, we went for dinner. And he said something to me, I can't remember what it was. And I looked at him and I told him, I want to go to America. And he was so shocked. And he was like, well, go then. And then I was like, okay, well, I will. And then 5 months later, we were broken up. I was in America.
I just want to say that must have been like his worst date scenario. So when he tells that story, it's an awful story.
I mean, it came out of left field. It was totally, I just realized, I was so young at the time, and I was just like, I don't want this life. I don't want this. I want more for myself. So finally, I just, took the jump, whatever the leap, and then I applied. Obviously, applying and going through the process, it was a lengthy process, and then getting your visa and all those things. But I ultimately ended up where I was always, wanted to be. I was in America. I was happy. And then unfortunately, to get a visa to America is difficult. So now I was there, so it was okay. But to extend that visa, it's difficult. You have to have really good reasons for wanting to stay longer than your intended purpose of stay. And then once you leave, it's nearly impossible to go back again. But because my visa was going to expire, I had no choice. I had to leave. So again, about a few months before I was due to leave, I had met someone again, and I knew at the time
you got out of the
that
movies and you're like, sorry.
yeah, it's like when people ask me how did you end up in China, I tell them, oh my gosh, it's like a soppy love story, so get ready. But I had met this person, and I really felt, for the first time, I felt like this is someone that I could see myself spending my life with. And a lot of people said, oh, you just want a green card, and it really wasn't the case. It really wasn't. But unfortunately, I had to go back home, and I did try to apply to return to the States. But the embassy, they were like, well, this is suspicious. You just got back, and now why do you want to go back again? And who's this man sponsoring you? Like, they knew we were up to something, even though it was no ill intentions. I just really wanted to go back and, I don't know, be with him, whatever. And then because that didn't happen, he kind of moved on with his life, and I was just completely heartbroken. So I decided that I need to move on. I need to go to the next step. And the thing that might make the most sense was to be an au pair again, but in a different country. And for South Africans, a popular destination for au pairing is the Netherlands, because we speak Afrikaans, and Afrikaans is a language that is similar to Dutch. So it's very common for South African girls to go to the Netherlands to be an au pair. So I applied to the program, and that's when my agency told me, well, we just opened a program for China. And I remember thinking, why? Like, that was back in 2011, 2012. And the only thing I'd ever seen about China at the time was nothing. I tried to go on YouTube and search, things about China. There was no China YouTubers. There was no information whatsoever. And the only thing I knew about it was that everything was made in China. So I had this image in my mind of China. And then when they showed me the photos, the agency, they told me, well, there's 4 major cities that we place people in, and they were Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Hangzhou, and Shenyang. And I mean, I saw these photos and I was shocked. Like, I won't lie, I was like, this is impossible. And then I got kind of curious, and then I decided that, since that person had done something extremely crazy to break my heart, I'm going to do something equally crazy. And I'm going to move to China.
Wow. That's the most interesting reason I've ever heard.
Yeah, I was out for revenge, kind of. And
I'm in China, take that.
Yeah, so I decided, and actually I was only supposed to come for 3 months. I was supposed to come as a cultural exchange person again, going to that small little town, and it was supposed to be only a 3-month thing. And it's been 11 years now. So yeah.
Well, a couple of follow-up questions, so we can clarify. Do you still live in Shenyang?
I do. I've moved to it's a town called Liaozhong, which is on the outskirts of Shenyang. And then once I left there and came back to Shenyang, I just never left. I have never lived in another city, which is, I know it sounds crazy to a lot of people. I never wanted to leave.
Do you travel around in China?
I have not been able to travel as much as I intended when I first came to China. I mostly traveled around Liaoning province, and then of course I went to Beijing. Yeah, I think I went to Changchun, which is like, I don't think that counts as traveling. It's like also, not really a tourist destination. But yeah, unfortunately, my own circumstances have just not allowed me to do that. I had a very tumultuous time when I first came to China, because at the time, the agency that placed me, they made it seem like one thing. And then when I met they really encouraged me not to make friends with foreigners. And I was very confused. And they would tell me that the foreigners in China, they are evil. They will try to stand in your head. And I was terrified. But then when I met people, I soon realized that they were telling me this because they were trying to keep me from finding out the truth, which eventually I found out. And then I just kind of had to fight my way through, surviving China. And that's why I haven't been able to travel as much as I would have liked to. But I do, and then I had a kid as well, so that kind of put a damper in everything. But I do hope to actually start traveling this year. That is like one of my main goals, because she's old enough now to travel around easier, and it will just be easier, I think.
That's fantastic. I just finally went to Shenyang this last year. I was on my way back from Harbin. I'm actually also going to Dongbei, which is your general vicinity to Harbin, next week.
Oh, really?
For the ice festival, which is like the biggest, most famous ice festival in the world. I mean, it's not near Shenyang, but it's in that direction.
I mean, you're brave, because I cannot. I remember coming to China. I knew that was on my bucket list because I saw it and I was like, that looks amazing. But then when I lived through my first winter in Dongbei, I was like, there's no way I would survive winter. There's no way. There's just no way. So I still haven't been able to convince myself to go yet to Harbin. But I would love to go. I would.
Well, I thought Shenyang was a beautiful city, and my wife and I went around. We were just taking a tour. We went to a Buddhist temple. We went to a Catholic church. We went to like a couple other places. It's a very lovely city. I was just really surprised because I'd never heard of Shenyang until we were on our way to Shenyang. And then I was like, this is as big as pretty much any city in the United States, and it's like a city I'd never even heard of. That's like China. Everything is just much bigger than you ever heard of before, and suddenly it's like, really, this is just here?
Right, right. And the funny thing is, I'm very lucky in the sense of I saw Shenyang grow to what it is today. Because when I got here, I remember looking at it and thinking like, what have I done? Like first I lived in Liaoning. It was like this small little town, and I remember thinking, I've made a huge mistake because at the time it was also December. It was so cold. Everything was dead and gloomy, and it was cold and miserable. And then in Shenyang there was a ton, and I mean a ton of construction going on everywhere. And I remember for a few years, just that was our lives. We just lived through like this constant construction. But the good thing is that we lived through it, and now we have this like amazing city that Shenyang is today. The Shenyang from 10 years ago to what it is now, you would not be able to recognize it at
Wow.
all.
Wow.
Like I can't even begin to explain the development of the city in the past.
I hope you took a lot of pictures, because you could probably just do a history of Shenyang book or something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So we've been here about the same amount of time. What's interesting about your story is you lived in America for a couple of years. I lived in South Korea for a year, and then I went back home too, and then I ended up coming to China. So our stories are very parallel, actually. It's very, very interesting. So, you mentioned that you had a little bit of trouble at the beginning, and that you got through, your China adventure and figured things out over time. I was wondering what, this is a question I ask everyone. Why are you still here? It's been, let's see, 11 years. Yeah. So what kept you in China? What keeps you in China for such a long period of time?
I think, when I was new to Shenyang, I think my first true love that I fell in love with was the expat community. A lot of people always joke about it because they say that the expat community in Shenyang is kind of like high school, or maybe even middle school if you want to go that far, because we are this community of expats, and everyone knows everyone. Even though you don't know them, you know them. But also everyone like loves to know each other's business. It's like middle school. It's like a bunch of, it's just it's a strange setup. But 10 years ago, I just fell in love with the sense of community that we had. And another guest that I had on my channel, an American girl also, she spoke about this and saying that why she loves living in Shenyang so much is it's you feel like a sense of community.
Mhm.
Whereas in other cities, she didn't feel that same sense of community among the foreigners. So for me, what made me really stay here in the beginning and fighting to stay here was just my friends from around the world. I've met when I lived in America, I was the foreigner. I was like the foreigner, and everyone else was just living their normal lives. But when I came to Shenyang, we were all on the same in the same understanding, because we were now all foreigners trying to just live our best lives and just trying to make it. So whether you were from America or New Zealand or South Africa or wherever you were from, we were just like, stuck together and helped each other. So I would say my friends at the time just made me want to not leave so quickly. And then there was something about it's something I can't explain to people. It's almost like a lot of people say they try to leave and go back home, but there's always something pulling them back. Like they need to come back to China, or they need to come back to Shenyang. And that's something that I felt like I couldn't leave. And I did leave. In 2013, I did go home for 4 months,
Mm.
and I just needed to come back. I felt like I stopped living when I went back to South Africa, because in South Africa you don't live in the city, you live in the suburbs.
Mm.
So it's kind of it's very beautiful, but it's kind of boring. You need a car to go everywhere, and there's not a whole lot. In the weekdays people work and then they go home, whereas in Shenyang it was like a totally different world. You live in the city, you can your lifestyle was just different, and you were always hanging out with your friends. And at 4 o'clock someone would say, hey, let's go meet at Uncle Sam's, and then you walk up there and people are sitting outside and the sun is shining, and it's just the vibe of everything is just it was just different than back home. So that really drew me to stay here. And then eventually I just became I don't know. I felt like this became my home, and I just couldn't imagine myself ever leaving. And then, of course, when I got pregnant, I had to make a decision on, am I going to go home, or am I going to go somewhere else, or am I just going to stay in China? And the thing that made the most sense was just to stay here, because I looked at the lifestyle here of the kids that live here, and yeah, there are some challenges that the kids who grow up here they face, but in a bigger picture, I just couldn't imagine myself raising a kid in South Africa, specifically South Africa. Maybe if I was American, I would, or Australian or New Zealand, whatever, I would have a different perception. But as a South African, I just couldn't imagine myself raising a kid there, because the country is just, on a downward spiral at the moment. So it just didn't seem like a wise thing to leave the safety of China and go to a country where, that couldn't offer me or my child the same thing. So yeah, I stayed because I guess I stayed because I had a baby. And I just, yeah.
Well, I wanted to test your theory about community, because I know one gentleman who lives in Shenyang, but he's not in your generation. So I want to see if you know him. Probably, I'm guessing not, because he's just simply like more than twice your age, probably. But his name is Mario Cavallo, and he's a jazz pianist. And he's a member of he's older, Italian-American gentleman, skinny, plays piano. So no.
I can't say that I have heard of him, because he's probably not lingering around in any WeChat groups. So that's why.
Yeah, okay. So, I feel the same way as you, actually. There are places in America that are safe, small towns and here and there. But I'm from San Francisco, and it's actually, there's a lot of violence, criminality, danger and stuff. And for me, one of the big reasons I continue to stay in China is just, it's 2 a.m. Any place in China, any city in China, I'm walking around at night alone, no worries. But if I'm in the wrong area of San Francisco, and even in the day, maybe like I could be robbed. I've actually been robbed at gunpoint by children. All kinds of stuff has happened to me in America. So like for me, I like living here because I feel really safe all the time. And that's a big thing for me too. So I think your answer, not just the community part, but the safety part is a huge thing for me. So yeah, I guess we've gone through a couple of these questions. Here's a good one. It's because people are always accusing me personally of not saying things that about China that I find challenging. So I'm going to tell you one example of something I find frustrating, and then I'm going to ask you. For me personally, I love walking. I mean, literally on my top 3 favorite things to do, it's like sleeping, walking, and riding bicycle. These are walking around is so important to me. So one thing I find frustrating about living in China is the electric bikes and the scooters and the bicyclists who are on the sidewalk. Even when there's a bike lane right there, there's a bike lane. Like you go that way, 1 meter, there's a bike lane. For whatever reason, the e-bike is zooming past me and an old lady with a baby. And I find this so frustrating. So yeah, I love China. I love a lot of things about China, but can we please get the 2-wheeled vehicles off of the sidewalk, please?
Okay, I'm laughing because I am one of those e-bikes.
Oh, it's you.
No. I mostly stay in the bike lanes because I'm terrified of hitting a pedestrian. As a foreigner, can you imagine what would happen to me? I feel like that, I don't even want to think about it. So I try to avoid it. But, especially in the morning when I take my daughter to school, the cars feel the lane that is meant for the bikes. So we have no choice to go on the sidewalk. So, and then, sometimes the bike lane might be too crowded or something. So you would have to go over on the sidewalk. But actually, for the most part, the bike lanes are so smooth to ride on. It just feels so much more comfortable than a sidewalk. But I'm definitely guilty of sometimes, but it's sometimes.
So is the producer of this show. She also rides an e-bike around on the sidewalks. So when I told her she said, Jason, can you tell me something you find frustrating about China? And I told her that. She was like, but not that one. Can it be something else? But that's the thing. And I don't blame the people who ride on the sidewalk. What I think is more regulation about who should be where would help the situation. So there should be hey, cars, get out of here. You can't park there. So that bicycle lane is open. So that e-bike people and whatever can be in that lane. So that the old lady on the pavement isn't having, Ulama drivers zooming by them or whatever.
Right.
Anyways,
Oh my gosh, these Ulama drivers, they are the most lethal of them all.
but they are so in a hurry too. Honestly, I was just okay. I get out of their way because I know they're probably the most stressed out, pressured of anyone in the outside moving cycle. I wanted to ask you what things in China are obviously you love China. You're here. You're safe. You have a great community. What do you find challenging though? What are some of the one or two examples of things that are that could be easier maybe?
I made a video about this about a month ago, talking about the things that the difficulties that I face. That particular video focused more on the difficulties I face as a foreigner rather than just things that I find challenging. But I think for the most part, the top thing would just be that sometimes there's I can speak Chinese to a certain degree,
Mhm.
but I do find myself in situations where I just don't know the word I need to know at this moment when I try to communicate with someone about something.
Mm.
For example, yesterday I was like, I had a moment of just wanting to lose my mind, and I was texting with my daughter's teacher.
Mhm.
And because she had texted me something that made me so mad, and I wanted to respond to her and explain to her my situation and my reason for being late yesterday. But I couldn't find the words to express myself properly. And then
Mm.
I had to like check the translation. And when you're like mad and you want to just tell someone,
And you're using hang on.
yeah, like hold on one second, so sometimes I feel like that's frustrating for me. And I mentioned this in my video as well. I know that that's my fault. Like, I need to obviously brush up on my Chinese, but I also mentioned in that video that Chinese is my third language. So I'm old. Okay. I feel like my brain can only absorb so many languages at my age. So I would say sometimes just the communication is a little bit difficult. But a part of the communication that frustrates me a lot, and this has nothing to do with being able to speak the language, to me, I don't know. I still haven't been able to figure this out because I've never actually asked a Chinese friend why it is like this. And even if I did, I think they wouldn't understand what I mean. But I feel like sometimes talking to the locals or getting information from them is like pulling teeth. Like, you have to, if I ask two questions at once, only one question would be answered. And I'm not entirely sure why. For example, if I send a message to my daughter's teacher and I asked her two specific questions, like, what time is, let's say, for example, I would ask her, what time do the kids get off today? And then tomorrow it's a half day, right? She would just answer my first question and tell me the kids get off at 4 o'clock today. And then I'm like, okay, what about my second question? I feel like it just, I don't know. I feel like Chinese people have a lot of patience. So it's like they don't mind, taking it slow and communicating it. It's something I can't understand. I'm just a very impatient person. So
Mhm.
maybe it's me. But in the communication senses, that's something that frustrates me is I feel like I need to, extract every bit of information sometimes when asking questions. And I'm really not sure if it's like I'm really not sure why. So in communication senses, that's something that frustrates me. If I
I
had to talk about something about the transportation that frustrates me,
Yeah, sure.
people are so calm on the roads, even when other people are breaking the rules. And I think that's because I'm a South African, and South Africans are very known for having like really intense road rage. Like, people get crazy in South Africa. So when a car stops in the middle of the road, a busy road, just to check their GPS or something, cars behind that person would honk once or twice, but no one is, killing each other. So they just have a lot of patience. So to me, sometimes I get so frustrated because it's like, why are these cars not moving? Can we just move? I guess maybe it comes down to my own fault. I'm just a very impatient person, I guess, in all areas. That's why I drive an e-bike and not a car, because I don't want to unleash my South African-ness on the roads.
Well, I find different Chinese cities have different like characteristics in terms of how busy people are. So I don't know, maybe it's Shenyang or maybe because I don't notice that in Beijing. And here in Beijing, there's everything is like cutthroat New York style, go 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 go. So there's a lot of honking and frustration when people break the rules here. So I think maybe in different cities you have different like kind of culture. I noticed when I was in Jinan, I'm sorry to pick on you Jinan folks, but I was in Jinan one time, and this was years ago, so maybe the culture has changed. Cars drove on the sidewalk
Oh
sometimes.
wow.
Yeah, so I was like, "What is going on?" There's a car behind me, the pedestrian, a full car, like normal sized car, honking at me for being in its way, and and that did not just happen once. So I was like, "Wow, this is something else." So yeah, I think maybe it's a more of a Shenyang thing. Here in Beijing, if you like stop in the middle of the road, it's going to be like horns everywhere, and people are going to use some very colorful language that it's the kind of language that you think is fun to learn.
Right. I do remember when I first came to Shenyang, the honking was nonstop and everywhere. And somewhere along the line, the government passed new laws about it, and people stopped honking so much. Now they actually tell you you're not allowed to honk. I think I'm the loudest honking my e-bike sometimes at
Beep, beep.
people. Like, so yeah, I've that's something I've noticed. It was definitely. I remember lying in my bed just listening to the constant honking. Maybe it's because I moved out of the city. Like I still live in the city, but I live more on the outskirts of the city. So
Mm,
not the
mm.
outskirts. I live across from the river, so it's more like a family friendly district and not in the city center. Maybe if I barely go into the city center because it just gives me so much anxiety. It's just too many people in cars, and I'm at peace here this side. So I do definitely, I've noticed that there was a change about the amount of honking that is allowed. I don't know if Beijing ever did that or not.
I'm kind of like you actually. I lived in Wuhan for a year, a little over a year, and my wife and I, we bought an apartment there, and we moved to a kind of a new area, and it was so nice because it was not near downtown. It was so suburban kind of,
Yeah.
and there's super tall buildings everywhere like normal in China, but the very few people on the streets outside. It was such a calming feeling. I can't wait to move back there someday because honestly, like when I'm in Beijing, everywhere's the city center, and it's like it's a little too intense for me personally. I was going to ask you how important knowing Chinese but I think you kind of answered that. So, we should all probably try to learn a little more. It seems like I very rarely meet a foreign person who is fluent enough that that's not a good piece of advice. I wanted to ask you about shopping, uh, delivery, and malls. So, how does that compare to back home in South Africa or your experience in Atlanta in the United States? Because for me, I I do enjoy going to the malls here because it's like going into its own little city of commercialism. There's some of them are like 10 stories tall. I wanted to ask you how has your experience of shopping and going into, the public commercial area been?
Mm. So there's a stark difference between the malls in Shenyang and the malls in South Africa, and I feel like most of the most popular shopping malls here are not they're not targeting me as a consumer because they have all of these high-end name brands. I mean, high-end brands that I could only dream of buying. Sometimes I look at the screen in K11 and they have these flashing screens of like a coat, and it just looks like a coat, but it's like 8,000 yuan for a coat. So
Like Gucci or something?
yeah, it's like all of these, even brands I've never even heard of, to be honest. So I feel like in South Africa, a shopping mall was just a shopping mall. You could go there, you had your expensive clothing stores, maybe two or three, and then you had your average ones, and then everyone was able to shop somewhere. But here I feel like everything is very high end. Everything's name brand, and then you do have H&M. That's like, okay, finally we have H&M. So
You just read my mind. That's exactly what my wife and I do.
yeah, yeah, and I was really stunned to see a lot of the H&Ms around Shenyang just disappearing. So it's, when we go to the mall, I mostly go to the mall to just have a coffee or walk around or just let my kid play on some of the free, slides and stuff, or just getting out of the house. I never really go to the mall with the sole intention of buying clothes unless I go to maybe Uniqlo or H&M or something like that. But for the most part, I actually just shop online when I need to buy anything, to be honest. The malls
Can I
are
ask
more
you
like
which app do you use?
for shopping.
Yeah,
I just use Taobao.
Taobao.
Yeah, I just buy everything on Taobao.
I'm on Jingdong all the time, so I was just curious.
Okay. I don't know why I am a Taobao person over Jingdong. I'm really not sure.
I don't know the difference. I have both.
Mm.
But sometimes one has something I want, and sometimes the other. For example, I find Taobao has better book options than Jingdong, but I find that Jingdong has better clothing options than Taobao. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's my specific needs. I don't know. I have no idea.
I bought actually, yeah, I bought dog food the other day on Jingdong only because I needed it delivered the same day. Whereas, on Taobao, you're going to wait maybe 2 days. So I don't know. I feel like I know Taobao like the back of my hand. Like I'm like a professional Taobao shopper, where Jingdong is something new to me. I'm really not actually sure why. There's no specific reason. I don't actually know why I prefer Taobao. It's really not wise. I do believe Jingdong maybe has more reliable stores. You're more likely to not find any counterfeit goods or something like that. That's what I've heard from people
I
at
love
least.
counterfeit goods. They're the
Yeah.
cheapest.
The reason also why I chose Jingdong as to buy my dog's food was because I'd heard some horror stories of people saying recently there was some stuff going on with the dog food being purchased online. So I needed it to be delivered
Mm.
on the same day, not going through many hands, and then just getting the package as soon as possible. So
Mm.
that's
So
that's
you have
what
a pet? Just
I
one?
have two dogs actually.
Two dogs. What kind of dogs?
Poodle. One is actually on my lap. She's sitting over here.
I love dogs. I bet, yeah, we live in such a that's so cute. Oh gosh. Yeah, I have cats. I have cats instead of dogs because I'm worried about I don't know if I think I'm too lazy to go walk them 2 to 3 times a day.
Right.
So because of my laziness, I have cats. Yeah, that's the short answer.
I am also lazy to walk my dogs, and that's why I moved to a ground floor apartment. So I have a fairly large yard for them. So I just open the door and let
You
them
have
go
a
out.
yard?
I,
Wow.
and you know what? It's a shockingly large yard for Shenyang standards. If you rent a ground floor apartment in Shenyang, they are so pricey, and the garden is usually just very, very small. So when I found this apartment at this price, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what's wrong with the place? Like, I'm taking it right now. And we actually moved in here right when the first lockdown happened. Like COVID was new, and then they sealed the gates at my previous apartment, and I told them I gotta get out, man. I gotta go to my garden apartment. So yeah, so that's why I moved here primarily, was just for at the time I only had one dog. So, and then I did also have a cat that we found in the community outside.
Mm.
She was just a baby kitten. And then I have a tendency to rescue a lot of animals. So whenever I see like an animal outside, I would, take it in. And then the cat lived with us for about, I think 9 months, and then she moved to another home. So I like cats. I like
Yeah,
animals.
I love animals too. I love pretty much every animal. Maybe not spiders, but all the other ones.
Well,
Uh,
that's the bad thing about having the apartment on the ground floor, because I do get a lot of spiders. A
mm.
lot of spiders.
Yeah, I had a ground floor in South Korea at my first apartment there, and I had centipedes come in, but not like little tiny cute ones, like the really long ones that move like they are jamming. They go so fast. I was terrified. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So I told at that time I worked for an English company, and they were providing me the apartment. I said, you either move me or I'm out of here. And so they got me a different apartment on like the 9th floor or something. So that was nice. I didn't have to be attacked by insects anymore. I wanted to ask, what kind of advice would you give someone who is planning on moving to China but has never been to China?
Ooh, what kind of advice? I think the biggest thing I would tell them is to just come to China with an open mind. Like, you have to be open-minded about it. I know a lot of people who come here for the first time, there's like a honeymoon phase, and then once that wears off, or maybe they don't even experience that, it's just pure shock. They find ways to complain about everything, from the taste of the food, or anything. And for me, I think my situation was different at the time, because I I actually like writing a lot. And at the time when I first came to China, I used to write about the experience. So I came here with a complete open mind, and I wanted to immerse myself in every single experience. Everything was new to me. Like even using a gas stove for the first time was a new experience to me.
Really?
So yeah, we use electricity.
Wow.
So, in fact, I had to boil a like I had to boil water on the stove top to make my coffee, and I didn't know how to. It was so funny. But because for me, every experience I was living was something to write about. So I just embraced every single thing, because the more experiences I had, the better, writing content I had. So
Mm,
for me, I was completely open-minded to anything and everything. And I think that's what made my transition into coming here so easy.
mm.
I think I had more culture shock when I went to America than I did when I came to China. And
Wow.
it's because I was ready. I was like, yeah, come, throw everything you have at me. I'm ready to write about this experience. So for me, that helped me a lot. So I would say just be open-minded and remember that it's going to be different.
Mm.
Everything is going to be different. And you just have to, embrace it for what it is. And you have to enjoy the experience. It's all part of, like, why are you traveling abroad? To learn about new things, new cultures. So just be open-minded and take it all in. I think that's the only advice I can give. If you can be open-minded about everything, then it's going to be much easier.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think the reason I ask these kinds of questions is because most of the people I interview, like you, have been here for a long time. And I think it's sometimes we forget a little bit about how that, the initial 6 months feels. So
Right.
I'm going to give you another question. What kind of advice would you give to someone who just came to China about how to find an apartment and what to do regarding that when their company says, "Oh, we'll find an apartment for you," and just subsidize it, or they give you money to go find your apartment, or they say they're going to help you find an apartment? Would you say to do that, or would you go a different route? What would you do if you had to start over, or if you're talking to a friend of yours who's coming here for the first time?
If I could give a suggestion, I would say, if the company offered to help you with it, I would say take them up on the offer, but you tell them we're going to go to the realty little whatever office together, and I will tell you what I need or what I want, and you will tell them, because the person wouldn't speak Chinese at that time, and then go with the company to see. And usually the realty office would show you the photos of apartments before taking you to see them. And right there and then, that's when you can, based on photos, decide this is something I want to see or this is something I don't want to see. Because I think a lot of times, you know, for us, we have different ideas of what a home is.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times, some of my Chinese friends always tell me, if I mention something about transport or traffic or something, they would tell me, "Well, just move." And I would tell them, "Are you crazy? My apartment is my home. I
Mm,
made that place a home.
mm,
It's just not just four walls, and a roof over my head. That's my home." So I think when you are a new foreigner, maybe the company thinks that, well, this person just needs a safe place to sleep, right? So
mm,
just put them into any apartment. But for us, I feel like if you have a place to come home to, you're new to China, everything is overwhelming. The sights, the smells, the sounds, everything. And to be able to come home at the end of a day and
mm.
just be in your own safe space that makes you feel comfortable, that's going to help a lot. So if you have a say in choosing that home, then that's going to make your stay also a lot easier. So don't just tell them, yeah, I want this and this and this, and then let them find you an apartment. I would insist on going with them to view the apartments and
Mm,
put your
mm,
foot
mm.
down. If they give you a budget and say this is what it is, and they show you 10 apartments and you didn't like any of them, don't give up, because
Mm.
there are tons of, perfect apartments out there. They might just not want to, I don't know, they might just want to get it over with quickly because it's a hassle. This is like a thing. It's like annoying. Oh, we have to find an apartment for this person. So I would just say go view the apartments together, and like don't give up just because you need an apartment. Just
Mm.
you know keep looking until you find what you actually want. That's
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Make it really hard at first to settle in, But once you've settled in, you've got exactly what you're looking for. That's really good advice, actually. I wouldn't have said that. I would have said something else, but I think your answer is better than mine. So we're going to move on. I wanted to add, you've been here a long time. Presumably back in South Africa, mom and dad are like, we miss Nadine. So can you tell us, how does your family feel about you being on the other side of the planet? You're literally in the opposite hemisphere. You're like on the other side of the planet.
Right. So my family is kind of unique at the moment because everyone is on a different continent at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah. I was the first little bird to leave the nest, like country-wise. I have two older brothers, first of all. So they are 4 and 5 years older than me. So I am the baby of the family, and then I left to go to America. I went home for a year, and that's when I came to China. And then my oldest brother, him and his family actually immigrated to Canada a few years ago, maybe like I don't even know, 3 or 4 years ago. So they live in Canada. And then just very recently, actually, I think like a few months ago, my middle brother, him and his family, they moved to New Zealand. So I've got now one brother in Canada, one in New Zealand. I'm in China. And then my mom and dad, they are the only ones left in South Africa, which is very sad because all of the grandbabies, my brothers, they have kids as well. So there's and actually our kids have never met each other. That's
Oh,
even worse.
wow. That is,
Yeah,
that's going to be for one heck of a family union. It's not even a reunion at that point.
right. So yeah, my family met my daughter when she was 5 months old. I had to go back to South Africa to do her visa.
Hmm.
So we were very lucky to spend Christmas over there. And then my mom came to China a year before COVID, like 2019, she was here.
Mhm.
And she was able to spend time with my daughter, but the rest of the time is just video calls. And then I've never met any of my nieces or my nephew. So that's really tragic and sad, I think. So
I have a similar situation. I met my older brother Michael's 3 daughters when they were basically babies. One was like 1 was like 3, one was like 6 or 7, and now like they're all like teenagers. And
wow.
so I have no idea who these people are, because they're not just like, mama, dada. They're actual young human beings with personalities and stuff. And I don't really know them at all. I see them on like Facebook and stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, oh, they seem to be doing all right. So, but I really don't know. So, for me, I think I may retire here. I really like it. I'm married to a Chinese national. My wife has an apartment here in Wuhan. I have stable job and stuff, and things are going my way. So I was wondering about you, like, how long do you see yourself living, the life in the Middle Kingdom? And is that what is maybe on the horizon for you?
For me, I always had a set plan. When my daughter was born, I always had an idea that when she's ready to go to school, like first grade, I would not be here anymore because I just felt like I wanted her to go to school in an English environment, just because that's our home language.
Mhm.
But she's in first grade now. She goes to Chinese school.
It's a great opportunity for her to learn Chinese.
I mean, she already speaks very good Chinese because she was born here. So she's lived her whole life here. She doesn't know she doesn't have any, she has a foreigner little friend, but they don't get to see each other very often. And in our community, she's got a lot of great friends here. And her
Mm.
Chinese is so good. Sometimes I look at them having conversations and I'm like, what are they even saying? Like, how do you know all of this? She's amazing. She's just amazing. So now she's in public school. And someone once told me it's actually a Chinese guy who moved to Australia when he was 10, and now he's back to Shenyang, and we're quite good friends. And he told me, when I spoke to him about this situation, he told me that if he ever had kids, he would let his kids go to Chinese primary school for grade 1 and 2, and
Mm.
then starting from grade 3, he would want them to move back to Australia. And
Mm.
he said that, the foundation that they get in grade 1 and 2 he would be happy with that. So
Mm.
I thought about it, and then I just kind of decided to just let, you know, just see, let's just go, keep going until
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, so you don't necessarily, you're kind of There's a Chinese phrase for this: feeling your way across the river using your feet on the rocks, something like that. So you're essentially just kind of seeing how it goes, right?
Yeah, I feel like, here for us, you never know where life's gonna go. Like, you have a more stable situation because your wife is Chinese. But for me, like, I have no direct ties to China. Like, I don't have a Chinese husband or anything. So it's not like, oh yeah, we can just stay here forever. I know that we cannot stay here forever, but I would ideally I would want to stay here for as long as I can,
Hmm.
because, we're very safe here.
Hmm.
Um, I have a daughter. I have to think about her safety. And, as a woman, a woman from South Africa, when I think about what's going on over there, that's just not, it's different. So for me, I think, yeah, just in terms of safety and just the overall lifestyle that we have. In winter, our lives become a little bit more boring because it's so cold in Dongbei. But I mean, when I think back on summer and everything we do and the things that we're able to do, it's amazing. So it's something that I want to keep giving my child this kind of childhood where I pick her up from school and then we take the e-bike, we go to the park, and it's dark, it's night. We drive the bike through the park, maybe stop at a restaurant, eat some barbecue, watch the old ladies dance across the street, do their, square dances.
Oh, you
And then,
should join in.
yeah, I want to join them, but and then at the end of the day, we come home and we feel like we have lived,
Mm.
whereas I feel like back home, you would pick up your kids from school, you would go home, eat dinner, and then what? It's like, so the lifestyle here, I want to keep giving my daughter that adventurous kind of lifestyle, something that I know she would not have if I had to move back home or any other place. But to answer your question about where I might want to like go one day, since my brother is in New Zealand now, I
Mm.
think that if I ever had to face a decision to leave, I
Mhm.
would probably want to go to New Zealand as well, because New Zealand is the close, for South Africans, it's a popular place to go because the weather is very.
Similar, is it a similar latitude in the southern hemisphere?
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So, the Australia, New Zealand is popular choices because the weather is just so similar and
Oh my
just.
gosh, Australia, it terrifies me. I've heard the spiders there are enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. But New Zealand just sounds more, I don't know, uh, it sounds different than Australia. I have a cousin who lives in Australia and he's really happy there as well. But probably since I have family in New Zealand now, that would seem like the most sensible choice. And then perhaps if I move there, my brother's there, perhaps we could help my parents uh, come over there as well. So that's something that's in the back of my mind, but
Mhm.
not any set plans really. It's just like a little seed of idea.
We have a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you about your YouTube channel. What are you're Nadine in China. That's right. That's how we find you. Nadine in China, Nadine in China. That's how we find your channel on YouTube. What is your goal there? What are you trying to do? What kind, or is it just something you do for fun?
So my channel actually started, it's something that I had wanted to do for a long time, but I never felt comfortable enough to put my life on the internet for strangers to see. It was kind of like an odd idea. And then when we lived during the whole COVID era, I would see a lot of just horrible things on Facebook that people were saying about, China. And it would make me so mad because I was like, I live here, okay? And it's not anything like what you guys are saying. So I had this idea to kind of do that to show at least my friends, share the link with my Facebook friends, my schoolmates, my classmates, old co-workers, let them see what my life is really like here, because I don't post a lot on Facebook. They might see a photo here or there, but they don't really know what our lives were like. So I had this idea, but then it never materialized. And then we were actually placed in home quarantine
Oh,
due
yeah.
to my daughter being a close contact in kindergarten or something like that. And that's how my channel actually started, because I wanted to document what that was like, because it was hilarious. Because they put an alarm on my front door. When you open the door, this alarm would just go scream.
Nadine has escaped.
Yeah, it was hilarious. It was really funny. So I wanted to document that. And then I just felt comfortable. Uh, Once I started doing that, I felt more comfortable and I decided, you know what, I'm going to keep showing people like the real China, because there's so much out there. People people have so many ideas, and they've never even been here. They don't even know anything. They just know from what they see online, or I don't even know where they get these ideas from. So my idea is to just show them, I do vlogs to show people this is just our life. We
Mhm.
have this is just our life here. And then I also do other videos that is more like maybe like monologue kind of videos, informational stuff, maybe just chatting a bit, just to share what my life in China is actually like, because I think a lot of people just have a misconception of what that is.
Mm.
So
You
that's
know,
like the goal.
at the beginning of the show, we had parallels and kind of like the timing of coming here and stuff. And I actually have the same parallel with you. My experience was I don't want to be famous. I'm not interested in that. It's not appealing to me. I never had that inclination my entire life. I around 2018, 2019, I started reading more media again for the first time in many years, and I was like, well, they're talking about China and saying some really weird things. Maybe I should tell them that's not what it's like. And then it just sort of just I was at home a lot from the pandemic, and I started making videos all the time. It's very similar to your reason also. So I ended up making all these videos basically trying to say, China's actually not like this terrible dystopian crazy place that you guys are saying it is, and it ended up just becoming its own thing. Thank you so much for joining the bridge. And anyone who wants to find you can go to YouTube and type in Nadine in China and find your channel. Thank you so much. Maybe we could do this again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I would love to sit down and chat again sometime.
Hello.